Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cannes Canon, the show where we dive into Cannes competition filmmakers' previous work to understand them better. And today we're going to be starting with Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson, love him, you hate him, everyone feels some way about him. If you don't know who Wes Anderson is, what rock are you living under? Wes Anderson is pretty much one of the most recognizable names and voices in modern American cinema. He is an American filmmaker who started his career as an independent artist in Texas in the 1990s. He became close with the Coppola family and began working very closely with them as his films, his casts, and his budgets continued to grow. Now, despite having an incredible run through the 2000s, his first appearance at the Cannes Film Festival was as the opening night film in 2012 with Moonrise Kingdom. And since then, he has played 2 more times in competition at Cannes, with his new movie being his 4th film to compete in the main lineup. And of course, his most notable film would be The Grand Budapest Hotel, which was his rocket to Oscar success back in 2014. He has a style that is instantly recognizable, perhaps more so than any other filmmaker on the planet. You can even look at one still image from a Wes Anderson film and know exactly who made that movie. You look online, there's memes about photographs that look like they could have come from a Wes Anderson movie. And I think that his place in the zeitgeist really came from The Grand Budapest Hotel. I think there's a lot to talk about with Wes Anderson. We've talked about him so much on the channel before. This is the 3rd time we've had to find a film for him in the Parallel Challenge. This is a filmmaker that's ubiquitous, so why do we need to profile him? I think the reason is that at the moment, more than ever, people on the internet are saying, oh God, can we just forget about Wes Anderson? He makes the same movie over and over and over. So I want to know, Arnaud, do you agree with that sentiment? Does Wes Anderson make the same movie over and over?
I agree that there's always going to be like some kind of fad or controversy or like trend related to the new release of a Wes Anderson film. I remember last time we profiled Wes Anderson for the Cannes Parallel Challenge for Asteroid City. You were mentioning like a trend on TikTok about, you know, like don't turn this tragedy into Wes Anderson.
For like vacations, they were like, don't turn your trip to Sweden into a Wes Anderson movie.
Exactly. That was more specifically about taking other cultures, quote unquote, and like turning them into a certain film. So I feel like this is just a kind of natural progression of that. And you know, like, especially for those who don't watch Wes Anderson films, they do feel samey. You know, even if there's a different work in the formal qualities and the colors and the decors or whatever, he has a very identifiable style. His last film, Asteroid City, was not that embraced by the public. So I think that it makes sense to me.
It's a pretty natural progression, I guess, when someone gets big enough and they start to get exposed more and more. I mean, that TikTok trend led a lot of people to watch Wes Anderson movies for the first time. And if your first Wes Anderson movie is Asteroid City, like, you're in for a hell of a ride, because that is a challenging film. That's a really odd thing for me to hear, because you can be a realist filmmaker and make films that have the same shaky camera, all set in the real world. You can do that for your entire career, and it feels like no one will ever call you out on making the same movie over
Here's
and over.
the thing, Wes Anderson does make different films. Asteroid City feels different than The French Dispatch, which feels different than
Dogs.
The thing is that, like, he's an auteur. And like, of course, his films are gonna be the same. It's the same guy making them. It's just that they're not familiar with auteurs. Of course, Steven Spielberg films are gonna feel the same. You know, like, it's the same sensibility.
But at the same time, like, you wouldn't hear that criticism as much for Spielberg, because he makes films that replicate a cinematic version of real life, that is. And I think he is the last of a dying breed of Western filmmakers, because from the beginning of cinema, there's always been very 2 distinct paths. There's been the people who recreate reality and the people who seek artifice. The difference is that the people who go for the realism, they're trying to trick the audience into feeling like it is real. The Lumiere brothers, the train arriving at the station, that was designed to make audiences jump out of their seats. But now think to Georges Méliès, another filmmaker at the beginning of cinema who pulled magic tricks all the time. There was no effort to convince people that this was real. It was embracing artifice, it was embracing a staged reality. And that became the norm through early Hollywood, through so many of those films. Think The Wizard of Oz. Think MGM freed unit musicals like An American in Paris or Singin' in the Rain. They're films that are set in a heightened version of reality, with sets and big costumes and things that don't feel entirely real. But as cinema has progressed, we've got this idea in our heads that cinema needs to be a representation of reality. Even alien invasion movies now, even superhero Marvel movies seek to look as real as possible.
Even a prequel to The Wizard of Oz feels like it has to
exactly. There used to be such great expression that came from Western film, and it came from this feeling that what you're seeing on screen could never be real. And Wes Anderson, I think, is the last American filmmaker making films like that. The pastel colors, the melancholy tone, the way that everyone talks. Honestly, we should be encouraging more filmmakers to break away from this need for reality.
I appreciate your passion
for Wes Anderson,
but also for this style of cinema. Coming from someone who has trouble engaging with his work, and has now seen half a dozen of his films at least. It's been a kind of a reoccurring thing for me personally as a film goer to try to understand how come I can't engage with this. I had a lot of trouble explaining it, and I think I'm starting to understand why I don't love Wes Anderson. To me, Wes Anderson is doing essentially kind of like the logical conclusion or like the big budget version of a home movie or a shoebox movie. It works best in certain cases. I think his animated work, for example, is like stellar. The way his puppets move, the way he can kind of get some like material truth, the way the framings are done kind of makes sense for this kind of medium too. But also, you know, I think when he stays in America, about Moonrise Kingdom, concentrating on kids' characters and through like 1960s summer camp works pretty well for this kind of filmmaking. But when he starts going all the way to Budapest, and there's not a single character speaking Hungarian.
Do you have a problem with Budapest?
It's all right.
It's all right? Ooh, okay.
It's all right.
Okay.
Like, I've watched it twice too. Like, I gave it another shot. It's a case-by-case basis a little bit, but I think it works best when it fits the kind of filmmaking he's trying to do, where it feels like...
When the content of the film feels like the way he's making it.
Yeah, I think for me, like, films that go too big, like The Grand Budapest Hotel, it loses its charm, I guess is what I'm trying to say. A home movie has charm because it's someone doing it with nothing. Wes Anderson has $25 million. He needs to convince us that at the heart, it's still a home movie.
I feel like I am always sold on that because he does make them that way. And it's worth noting his sort of summer camp approach to direction. They all rent a house, they stay there together, they have breakfast and dinner every single day, there's no call sheets, and they go to set. And that's the way that they operate. And that's why he has such big ensembles who are all agreeing to act for very cheap. They're not doing their normal rates. People like the way he makes movies.
So let's talk about Moonrise Kingdom, the film that we're paralleling.
So this is actually a very interesting thing because Arnaud, you've seen half of the movies of Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie probably upwards of 5 or 6 times.
Jesus Christ.
Well, Moonrise Kingdom is a story about two 12, 13-year-old troubled children on the island of New Penzance, just off the coast of Maine. And the film is set 3 days before a historic storm hits the island. And these two children have run away together, trying to start a new life. Sam Shakusky, the main character, is an orphan living in a foster home, and he is a very devout Boy Scout with survival skills. He pitches a damn good tent, basically, and he can start a fire. He's running away with this young girl named Susie, who is a bit of a troubled girl from a kind of broken family. And the two of them have found solace in each other, have found understanding in each other. And so what we get through this is sort of a manhunt, where we have all of these Boy Scouts, the police, all of the adults on the island searching for these two kids before the storm hit. And what we get from that is sort of a quasi-satire of like an army movie, an escape movie, and an adventure.
It's a much higher scale adventure than you would expect from just like a Boy Scout
well, that's
movie,
the thing.
You know?
It's like
with like lore and like camp hierarchy. And
it's either a very high production Boy Scout movie or like the most childish version of The Great Escape starring Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
That's such a lovely thing about this movie is that it is unlike anything else that has been made. There's no other Boy Scout movie like it. The thing that I love about this is that they really take that Boy Scout lore seriously. It's like you're watching the military. I laughed my ass off at the scene where the chief of the Boy Scouts has Edward Norton hand him his badge and his knife. Because it's like, gun in your badge, officer. This has a real core to it that's a lot deeper than just the surface level silliness of it
But
all.
even then, the sense of humor is not purely goofy. Like, there are some really good gags here and there. I know I laughed when Edward Norton is calling Sam's parents, and the parents, which he doesn't know yet are adoptive
they're
parents,
foster
are
parents.
like, yeah, we won't be inviting him back. And I was like, what the hell? What do you mean? What does that mean? And the whole rest of the phone conversation is unpacking what that means.
Yeah.
You know, there are really like clever bits of dialogue that are genuinely funny. It's fun to see these kids acting or trying to act like adults, exploring their budding sexuality. You know, there's a bunch of that kind of thing going on that I think adds to the home movie teenagers wanting to play the big action hero thing a little bit. That's a big part of the charm of the film, the fact that you have this kind of childish world that is trying to be more of the adult world.
Well, and in a way, every adult character in the movie wants to be a kid, and every child wants to be an adult. And that's sort of the tension that we have there in this ensemble, especially when you look at the Jason Schwartzman character of the the cousin who like marries the two, and he's running his like illicit trading in the army base, as well as all these other characters who are dealing with sort of these broken feelings that come with age, that come with growing up. And meanwhile, Sam and Susie just want to be older. They just want to be taken more seriously. A big thing running through this film is anger, this feeling of how frustrating it is to be small in a world that's made for grown-ups.
The film is concentrated like mostly on an island or on the coast of Maine, away from big, you know, institutions, authorities, whatever. But you do have,
There's
you
no
know, Tilda
cars on the
Swinton's
road.
character like popping in and kind of representing that a little
Which
bit.
is hilarious that they didn't give her character a name, it's just social services.
What you've been saying is kind of the reason why Edward Norton was kind of the MVP for me
totally.
of the film. Is at first you think he's a bit of a hard-ass like authority figure, but you realize he's kind of a school teacher trying to take this seriously, trying to be a bit of a child again, but also being real with these kids. The heart-to-heart he has with Sam is like a really touching scene.
I love that moment where he speaks to Sam and he's like, no one told me about your circumstances. And I'm sorry, I would have helped you more.
One of the things that bugs me a little bit is the central relationship at the heart. And I think that I like that it's like these two young kids who are trying to understand themselves, who would like to think of themselves as older, but I have so much trouble sensing any really tangible chemistry between them.
I think that's very purposeful though. All of the child actors are really stilted. And it's using that to effect because, again, they're all trying to hide their emotions. And I think with these two characters and their romance, what it's really getting at is, are they actually in love? No, probably not. They're kids. And what they want is to feel loved. What they want is to feel seen. They want to believe they're in love. They want to see themselves in someone else. And that's what they have. It's not that they actually have chemistry. They've barely even met. The thing that they have is recognition of one another. The characters think that they see themselves in each other. And that's where their love comes from.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a lack of connection I have for the characters themselves. And where I find truth in characters like Edward Norton's, like the parents notably, I can see where they're coming from. In other Wes Anderson films, one of my biggest issues is that I have trouble latching on some of these characters. It's not that I want to identify myself to characters. It's more so that I need something to make me
There needs to be
feel
some sort of understanding of like maybe why they are the way that they are.
And I appreciate what Wes Anderson is doing on a screenwriting level. I just feel like there's still a little bit of a disconnect.
That's a fair take, but one last thing I guess I'll say is that thematically, I feel like there's a lot of richness to this. All of his films have this sort of melancholy hopefulness to them, but what I really feel at the end of this one is like this overwhelming feeling of life really isn't fair, but life can still be good. We can still find goodness even when things suck, even when things aren't fair, even when growing up is hard, even when we're miserable with the way that life has turned out for us. We can still find goodness in the unfairness.
Company Secretary status report. All accounted for, Scoutmaster. Okay, boys, we're gonna make a run for it. Fall in, let's move. Come on, follow me.
Well, that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed our discussion on these filmmakers.